You guys being here today. It's a great turnout. I'm Tim Hooper with Chamberlain Roofing Waterproofing, the chair of the industrial committee. My committee, a lot of my committee members here, they all helped put this stuff together. I'd like to recognize them. I saw Tracy Piles here, Eric's here, Jennifer DeWolf is around here somewhere. Sarah Adams, our liaison, is here. Taylor with BOMA, of course, and then Acacia is here. So thank you guys all for having a small part or a large part of putting this together. Housekeeping, restrooms through this door, just down this hallway right here on the right-hand side are the restrooms. The topic of today's discussion is sustainability and a whole health energy plan. Our sponsors for today's event are Five and Southern Botanical. Thank you guys for letting us use your guys' space for this and the lunch and everything. So Ben and Rice with Five. Rice is going to be presenting today. Ben put everything together and helped organize everything. Rice just shows up and does the deal, right? And then Kim and Mark with Southern Botanical, along with their other helpers over here, help put everything together. Appreciate your guys' part in making this happen as well. So if you can just give kind of our recognition for all the people that will come out. Now let me introduce the presenter of today's event. Bryce Loomis joined Five in September of 2018 as a market risk manager. Prior to Five, Loomis worked at APX in San Jose, California, Bakersfield. And MP2 Energy, which is now a subsidiary of Shell Energy North America, where he helped build their demand response and distributed generation business from the ground up. His graduate work included a summer internship at PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, as I know it, which is crazy because there's like, what, 3 providers in all of California? Right. SoCal Edison, PG&E, and someone else. In San Francisco as an Environmental Defense Fund's Climate Corps Fellow. As part of his MBA program, Loomis spent time at the
Technological Autónomo de Mexico City.
There you go. Studying and expanding his professional network within one of the most exciting electricity markets in the world today. Also, we have Kim Sol Cruz, who has been in the commercial real estate energy for 13 years and in the landscape business for 4 of those years. Kim has remained active in BOMA of Greater Dallas during the last 13 years. She has served on the Allied Council, Programs Committee, Membership Committee, Government Affairs, and Young Professionals. And also Mark's been involved in the DFW landscape industry for over 40 years. He has been active in BOMA of Greater Dallas since 1996. Don't age yourself.
I hear age myself.
He has served on and chaired many of the BOMA committees, including the Allied Committee, or Allied Council Director. He also holds a LEED AP certification and is presently a business developer for Southern Botanical. So that being said, I'll hand it over. I don't know who's starting.
All right.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Taylor. My first BOMA Dallas event. Excited to be here. Beautiful space, Southern Botanical. Thank you guys for hosting this today. So, if I don't mess this up before I start. A little bit about Five. I think Ben Manna does an amazing job as an ambassador of our company. But we are a full-service energy advisory firm located here in Irving. And we've got really a nationwide and international practice at this point. We serve clients from New York City and Boston all the way down the eastern seaboard to Washington, D.C., west to Chicago, and then, of course, Texas. We've also got a practice in Mexico City, so I sprinkled in that little blurb about my time in Mexico City. That's Five. And, you know, here's our mission statement. Started the company because we believe you deserve better. I have been in the industry for a while, and there's a lot of activity going on in the energy industry in Texas. And there's a lot of, let's just say, suboptimal actors in our industry. And one of the things that I really appreciate about our company is really put our clients first. And so that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. A little bit more about the company. Again, full service from kind of data analysis to procurement of commodity deals, gas and power, to ongoing services on the demand side, whether that's energy efficiency projects, demand response, which is something we're going to talk about a little bit today. And then, you know, another big thing for us these days is carbon management and the intersection of sustainability in the energy industry. Something else we're going to hit on today. It's certainly a growing topic, not only in Texas, but across the country. Here's what we do. Yeah, love that we've got a great presence here at BOMA Dallas, and look to continue that in the future. We've got this in-house platform that we've developed. It's called Level 5. This is really where I spend all of my days, and it's a really, really powerful platform. I would say industry leading. What's really nice about it, we've got our own in-house development team, which is rare for folks that participate in the middle market and our side of the industry. So if you'd ever want like a demo of this system, please contact Ben or Jerry Stewart, who's not with us here today, but two great contacts for y'all. We love showing this off. It's really powerful. And again, like I couldn't do my job without the incredible abilities of this tool. Without any further ado, we're going to start off today by talking about Winter Storm Uri in February and what the heck happened to our state. Poor Willie Nelson's freezing. I was without power in Houston for 76 hours. I've talked to several folks in the room who suffered extensive damage, right, to your buildings and your assets from that storm. What happened, why, and what can we do as asset managers and real estate owners to harden our energy-related assets to prevent this kind of stuff from happening again? Because actually it is preventable. Even if you leave sort of the state politics and the architecture of our grid aside, we actually do have the ability with technology and with markets today to really take control of our energy-related assets. So start off with just a visual here. What we're showing are spot electricity prices as traded in Houston all the way back to 2011. So y'all probably know this, but you know, Texas has a free market for electricity, and it's freely bought and sold on an open market, just like any other commodity, corn, oil, gas. So what we can see in the chart is that over the past 10 years, spot electricity prices have remained more or less below $50 a megawatt hour on our y-axis here. Yes, in August when it's super hot, there's some volatility. So in 2019 in August, we had spot prices increase over $125 a megawatt hour. But in general, again, you know, let's call that 95% of the time, spot electricity prices are below $50 a megawatt hour. Until Uri. Again, looking at our y-axis here, look what happened in February 2021. Spot electricity prices, this was Houston, but the same was true in Dallas and all over the state. Spot electricity prices literally blew out to levels we had never seen before by orders of magnitude. So spot prices averaged over $1,500 a megawatt hour during Winter Storm Uri. For folks that didn't lose power. So in my case, without power, I luckily wasn't exposed to those prices, but I'm, you know, stuck making fires, trying to keep my wife and puppy warm. For folks that didn't lose power and were exposed to these types of prices, maybe some of y'all are sitting in this room, that was a painful experience. we've been working, Ben and I, with clients who have got these power bills that they can't pay, right? I mean, they're literally astronomically high. So the system broke. The system broke in a big way, and it's left a lot of damage. It's something like $80 billion in damage to the state took place just in that 1 week period. So yeah, truly kind of disaster in every sense of the word. A little bit about what happened. So this is a chart from ERCOT, that's the grid operator in the state of Texas. And what we're looking at on the x-axis here is the week of February 14th. So if y'all remember, Valentine's Day was Sunday, February 14th. And that's when the cold really started to come into the state. As we get into Monday, February 15th, in the early morning hours, right after midnight on February 15th, things started to go really, really wrong really quickly. And what this chart shows is that this is a problem across all power generators. There wasn't one particular type of resource that failed. It was all resources that we have to generate electricity in Texas failed. So the green line is the amount of natural gas fire generation that was online. So we see that it was online, creating about 25,000 megawatts Monday and Tuesday, and then slowly just started tripping offline, is the word that we use in the industry. These power generators were not able to produce electricity either because they were frozen, instrumentation was frozen that was exposed to the elements, or in some cases, they were actually able to get the supplies. They weren't able to get natural gas delivered to their facilities. And we're gonna look at another chart on the natural gas side in a minute here. Blue line is wind. So wind actually was holding up okay, and then again later in the week it started to really taper off. One of the things that we've discovered through this storm is that wind turbines collect ice. When they collect ice, the wind operators are forced to curtail those assets so that they don't destroy themselves, because they simply can't operate safely in icy conditions. What we've actually learned is that there are ways for wind power plant owners and operators to winterize their systems. This is how wind farms are able to operate, say, in Norway, Sweden, and North Dakota. But in Texas, wind operators had not made those investments in their fleets. As the storm hit, wind power dropped offline. The black line is coal. So, we don't use a lot of coal in Texas these days anymore. There are only a couple of remaining plants. But even coal, there were literally piles of coal that froze during this storm, and they could not move the coal with bulldozers into the power plants. It's not quite as pronounced, but nuclear on here, it's that kind of dark blue line that's just above the yellow line. We had a nuclear facility close to Houston. We've only got 2 nuclear plants in the state, but the one that's close to Houston is called the South Texas Project. A water coolant line froze and the nuclear plant tripped offline. So again, an across the board failure of our power generation assets in the state, which is why the power outages were so extreme. 4 million people were without power for a prolonged amount of time, 3 or 4 days in some cases. So a little bit about, again, we're going to look now, we're going to home in on the natural gas sector because natural gas was honestly the biggest surprise to a lot of us in the industry. It's pretty obvious if you got ice on a wind turbine blades, the wind farm isn't going to operate. But a lot of us in the industry really believe that even in worst case scenario, the natural gas fleet was equipped to continue to operate even in extreme scenarios. Well, here's why it didn't. This chart shows natural gas production in the lower 48. That's the 48 states south of Canada, and how much gas we were producing during this week of February 14th. The black line was actually the amount of gas that we were able to pull out of the ground The red line is what was expected. That's our 30-day average for natural gas production. Most of this gas is produced in West Texas, some in New Mexico, some in Colorado, some up in North Dakota, but the vast majority of the gas in this chart is produced in West Texas. And I mean, look at the drop. We're talking 10,000, 15,000 MCF of gas that was offline. And this is simply because the wellheads froze. So if you think about natural gas production these days, there's a lot of water and chemicals that are used to force the natural gas out of the ground. And when temperatures are 0 and 5 degrees Fahrenheit, the wells literally freeze and the gas is not able to flow through the pipelines and to the power plants. This was not something that we expected to happen. Yes, it's been that cold before in West Texas and in North Texas. But again, this was sort of just a failure of the resource owners and the asset operators to invest in their systems and harden their systems. This gas wasn't getting to power plants. The power plants couldn't operate, which left us with these massive shortages of electricity during the storm. The Texas Legislature, I don't know how many of you guys have been following the legislative session that just ended last week. They have been trying to address some of these issues. I don't think they've made a lot of progress, unfortunately. In fact, there were several bills that are on Governor Abbott's desk right now to try and address some of these critical issues, but he has not yet signed any of them. So we're still waiting to see as an industry about what is going to change in terms of our infrastructure and in terms of these entities that are in charge of coordinating natural gas supply and electric power supply, increasing communication amongst these entities, which was another failure that was exposed during this crisis. We just don't know how these state agencies are going to be reformed to prevent this type of a disaster again. Which leads us to what we can do to, in lieu of state activity and state action and investment in our infrastructure, what we can do as energy managers to harden our energy assets. So that's going to be the next kind of piece of my presentation. But before we switch off from Winter Storm Uri, I did want to address any questions because I know it's been a hot topic out there. Anybody? Yes, sir. Yeah.
So we saw maybe for the summer, because I know there's been buzz around like the extreme heat, and is there anything we can do to prepare or just, I guess, let our tenants or owners know what to expect?
Summer's going to be tight. There have not been, since February, of course, we have not had enough time to bring new thermal power plants online in the state, which is what's needed. And by thermal plants, I mean coal, natural gas, and nuclear. Those take years to build and bring online. It was, a month ago, if you asked me that question, I would have been more nervous. All the rain that we've gotten this May has really crushed the drought conditions that existed a month ago. So that's good. We're out of drought, but it's going to be hot. I don't know if you guys have seen the statistics of the amount of people that have moved to Texas in the past year, right? It's shocking, especially cities like Austin. So more people move into the state, more demand for electricity, no new power plants. It's going to be tight.
So are you saying like rolling blackouts more? Do people see more of those?
Sure hope not, but I can't tell you that. I can't tell you no. It's definitely a possibility. In August of 2019, when we saw the last volatility in the spot electricity market before Uri, we did have some blackouts then. They weren't major, right? We're talking outages of a couple of hours on kind of like a Wednesday, Thursday afternoon when demand is really high. That's not out of the question, I think, for this summer. So what can we do as asset owners? We're going to get into some strategies. I think you may be familiar of this concept of 4CP. So Ben and I and our company, we do send out notifications of when we forecast grid conditions to be tight. I know it's not always feasible for folks to reduce electricity when they get an email from us, like at 10 in the morning and we're asking for energy reductions at 3 p.m. that afternoon. I know that's not always feasible, but to the extent that we can do those types of things on the days that we know the grid conditions are going to be tight, that really helps everybody, right? Not only us on our delivery costs with Encore, but it helps the state. It helps ERCOT manage the grid. In fact, California, with all the wildfires and stuff that have been going on there, they've had a lot of success of getting folks to voluntarily reduce energy consumption, which reduces blackouts. So again, it's a little weird, right? Asking for folks to make those kinds of reductions for sort of the greater good, but we're going to actually get into some reasons of, if you do that, there are ways to make money. Not only ways to save money on your Encore costs, but actually ways to generate cash as well through demand response programs. Kind of a long-winded way of saying managing energy helps the grid and helps save our costs on energy. Other questions on Winter Storm Uri? Yes.
Are you seeing any success in fighting those large bills that people incurred, that buildings incurred?
The success stories that I've heard of mostly have to do with negotiating with the suppliers to get a discount. In some cases, we've heard of suppliers putting together payment plans to where, you know, they at least give you a couple of months, or maybe in some cases a couple of years to extend out the duration of those payments. We've heard of some folks that have taken drastic steps of just switching away from the supplier that they owe lots of money to another supplier, knowing full well that supplier A is going to sue them, which is happening. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as a strategy without consulting your legal counsel. But people are doing that simply because they don't have a way of paying those bills. They need to switch to a provider on a rate that is normal, and so that they can continue operating their business, attracting tenants, being competitive in the market, and letting the kind of legal process play out with the supplier that's price gouging. Yeah, those are kind of the success stories that I've heard of so far. That's on the power side. Natural gas is even more challenging because it's not as liquid of a market. So if you're stuck with a really big gas bill, really not a whole lot you can do other than negotiate, try and get a discount. But yeah, by the way, natural gas bills are as exorbitant as power bills for some of our clients. So yeah, it's tough event. Any other questions, thoughts on Winter Storm Uri? Good. Okay. All right. So what can we do, right, in light of all of these challenges here? Got a couple of ideas for y'all. We've already kind of touched on some of these. First of all, on the commodity side, right, it's both a blessing and a curse in Texas that we've got flexibility. We've got options with regard to who we sign our gas and power commodity contracts with, as well as the structures of those contracts. By structures of contracts, I mean that these are 10, 15-page contracts full of legal clauses. And it's really, really important that we pay close attention to what's written into those clauses. So by button up, I mean, if you don't know where your contracts are, if you don't know what's written into these contracts, please go and hunt them down, find them, contact Ben or Jerry or myself to look through these and just, get everybody confident and comfortable in the way that those contracts were written. We want to know when these contracts expire. We want to know if there's any exposure at all to spot prices and things like that. And another really kind of nasty surprise out of this storm is there's a cost component that we call ancillary services. Before the storm, a lot of people had never heard of ancillary services. It's actually a really important component of these contracts, and many suppliers have taken, let's just say, liberties with how they interpret their own contracts to be written. And some suppliers have been passing through the costs of these ancillary services at cost directly to customers, even when customers thought they were protected from those types of pass-throughs and they thought they had a fixed price for ancillary services. turns out that isn't always the case. So it's definitely, while this event is still fresh in our minds, let's take a look at those contracts, both gas and power, make sure we're good to go. The other thing is this topic of resiliency. So we've been out talking about this one a lot. In fact, my boss and I did a webinar on microgrids a couple of months ago. It's out on the internet if you want to go watch that. Microgrids are a hot topic. We're working on, I would say, 5 projects right now in Texas that are one way or another looking at the feasibility of installing microgrids at facilities. There's a really successful company called Enchanted Rock. Maybe some of y'all have heard of them. They're based in Houston. They have installed these microgrid systems at every Buc-ee's around the state, at every HEB around the state, at every Texas A&M University facility around the state. And they have found a lot of success because now folks like HEB and Buc-ee's are now in sort of the business of marketing themselves as these centers, right, for people to go during disasters, to stock up on supplies, stay warm, stay cool, because these facilities have power running all the time thanks to these microgrids. That's a really innovative and cool company. I think we're only going to see more and more of those types of companies pop up. And so Vibe's role in that is we looked at the feasibility of installing something like an Enchanted Rock system versus installing a different type of technology like something that comes from Generac. So we look at all the different types of microgrid technologies that are available. We help our clients make the right decision in terms of the costs and benefits for them. The other really big one, I know this was a big deal for folks where Atmos is the gas supplier, which is primarily North and West Texas, is analyzing the tariff that we're on. So in gas, there are 2 types of tariffs. There's a firm tariff, which essentially means regardless of what's going on, you're going to get that first claim on the gas commodity. And there's interruptible tariff, which means that in extreme cases, the gas company will call it OFO. That's an operational flow order, and they'll actually curtail your facility. So we have, I'm thinking of one particular client, really big industrial client. They're a food processor. They thought they were on a firm supply tariff with Atmos. Turns out they were not. They didn't have gas at their facility for 3 days up here. I think they're in Grand Prairie. And that caused them all sorts of problems, not only lost product and lost revenue during that storm, but broken equipment. These equipment that's not made to stand idle for 3 days in freezing temperatures, and that's what happened. So they're looking at massive costs to replace the equipment. That's another one. That's going to be buried again in your contracts with Atmos. Definitely recommend now is the time. Go and understand what type of tariff you're on, the pros and cons of being on that tariff. Of course, being on a firm supply tariff does come with a cost premium, but for a lot of folks, it's worth it, especially in light of Uri. Demand management. This gets back to what Sarah was asking about. So there are these programs called demand response. This gets onto the electricity side. If you have the ability at your facility to reduce electricity consumption on short notice, say 2 hours notice, there are ways for you to make money in the state's electricity market through demand response. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute here, but really getting to that point where demand management is incredibly important. Not only does it help relieve stress on our infrastructure, but it allows us to make money and to essentially arbitrage the way that the tariffs are written for these different commodities to be delivered to us. And that's a good thing. And then last but not least is sustainability. I've got a section on this in a little bit, but another thing that came out of the storm was if you look at the maps of greenhouse gas emissions from the state right after Uri, they actually increased in a really big way, because a lot of these facilities, especially oil and gas related petrochemical facilities in the Houston area, that had lost power for days, when they start back up, there's a ton of pollution that comes off of these facilities. Just another kind of pillar or another factor of that disaster that a lot of folks didn't ever see coming. Sustainability is becoming bigger and bigger of a topic. There's a process that we work with our clients on. It starts with quantifying your greenhouse gas emissions. And then there are several strategies now in the marketplace related to reducing and even offsetting your greenhouse gas emissions from operating your facilities. So sort of, these are the 4 primary strategies that I would recommend for this group, and we are going to touch on several of these in more detail here. To our first topic there of buttoning up our contract structures, what I've got here is a spectrum of the different types of electricity contract structures you can have in place in Texas. You're all the way on the left, 100% fixed price. Hopefully most of us in the room are on that type of a product structure. And we would know because our power bills weren't drastic during the storm. This type of product structure has got a high upfront cost, but a very low budget risk. And then on the other end of the spectrum, low upfront cost, high budget risk. Full disclosure, that's actually how I was buying my electricity at my house, was on the 100% index with this company called Gritty. Anybody heard of Gritty? Yeah, I love Gritty. I miss them. They went bankrupt. Adios. But I actually didn't get burned on that structure because, again, I didn't have power. So talk about the best form of demand response, right? Just losing power. So most of our clients kind of fit over here on the left side. We do have some that like that exposure to index. Yeah, we've got a handful that were on that structure and certainly are paying the price for it now, but they knew those risks. And I think myself and our team, we take pride in the amount of education that we had done with clients on that structure in advance of Uri. These are folks that were well aware of the risks. So, knock on wood, nobody's fired us yet that was on that particular contract structure, so that's good. But then what I really want to hone in on are these middle options, because there is a middle road, right, where that I think better balances risk and cost. And we're going to look at a couple of examples of this, but these are different flavors of a block and index structure. The first one we're going to look at is flat block and index, and the second one is a shaped block and index. Both have sort of different advantages associated with them. First is this visual of a flat block and index power structure or a contract structure on a power contract. So in blue here is the facility's hourly electricity demand. We've just got a week here, Sunday to Saturday. Again, that blue line, our y-axis is in terms of kilowatts. So the blue line is the amount of kilowatt hours that this facility is consuming. And the green line are flat blocks. And in this case, we're looking at a 1.5 megawatt on-peak block. On-peak is your weekdays from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then off-peak is nights and weekends, essentially. And so when you put a product like this together, it in this case, it doesn't perfectly match the load, but it does a pretty good job. And you see you're certainly overhedged on Monday there, because this facility actually has scheduled maintenance outages on Monday. So that's why we're overhedged on Monday there. A little bit overhedged Tuesday, but then by the time we get into Thursday, Friday, that's a pretty good match for the load. And so what's above, the sections that are above those blocks are the sections where we would be exposed to spot electricity prices. So we just want to make sure that, again, that's understood by the client. And in most cases, we want to at least have an understanding with the client that where if spot prices go to some extraordinary level and you're exposed above the volume of your blocks, that you're at least able to curtail or reduce your electricity consumption a little bit to get back within that range where you're hedged. So that's a flat block structure there. Yeah, again, we regular outages on Mondays. And then we can move over to something like a shake block. So in this case, the blue line, the exact same electricity consumption data. These are the electricity requirements for the facility. And what we've done here is we've just put in an 80% hedge. So we have hedged 80% of the historical volume of the volumes that are required by the facility. And this is load following. So, you take the prior 12 months of data, and then you hedge exactly 80% of those volumes on a go-forward basis. What's nice about this example here is that if we know this facility is always taking regular maintenance outages on a Monday, great, we can come in and we can say every single Monday, we're gonna hedge to 80% of those really low volumes. And then you don't end up with a scenario like with a flat block where you're over hedged every single Monday of the year. So again, depending on the load profile, depending on the risk appetite for the client, this is a structure that we recommend more and more. Again, because you're not paying the high upfront cost of being 100% fixed, but you get a lot of budget certainty with this type of product. It's just a matter of finding where you fit on that spectrum from a couple of slides ago. Moving on to microgrids, I'll zip through this one pretty quick. Just a couple of benefits of having microgrids. You get the reliability like we talked about with that Enchanted Rock example at HEB and Bucky's. Security, gosh, and what I mean here is cybersecurity. So, imagine a scenario, we may not be far from this, again, knock on wood, where the grid is cyber attacked, taken down for some period of time, just like the Colonial Pipeline and that delivers gasoline to the East Coast a couple of weeks ago. So you get that increased security over your facility. There's actually great benefits in terms of power quality. So if you're again, go back to that food processor example, if you're someone that has very sensitive equipment, a data center is another example of this, where your power quality requirements are high. A microgrid delivers power quality better than the centralized grid can deliver, because it's got voltage dips, it's got frequency dips. That can destroy or knock offline some types of equipment. So if that's important to you, that's another benefit of power grids. Sustainability, the last 2 points are related there. With the microgrid, you can do something called peak shaving. So that's where you switch your facility from 100% grid electricity over to this microgrid, which could be a backup generator, it could be a battery, it could be a fuel cell. Again, lots of different technologies out there that can provide this service. But the point is that during those peak afternoon hours when the grid is stressed, you are shifting your facility over to on-site power supply, which saves you on costs, and it also reduces stress on the grid. So that's another benefit of microgrids. Again, we got a hour-long webinar out there on the internet where we go deep on this topic. So I'll leave it at that for now. Next is this concept of 4CP. So what we've got here is a chart of a client's facility, and each line represents what the client was consuming on the hottest 4 days of last summer. And these hottest 4 days matters because the way that our transmission costs from Encore or from Centerpoint, where I live, are determined is by how much electricity we're consuming in each of the 4 summer months when the grid is at its max demand or its peak demand. So essentially what ERCOT, the grid operator, does is they point a radar gun at every single meter in the state, and they see what you are consuming at exactly those intervals when the grid was at its peak in the summer months. They take the average of what you were consuming in these 4 coincident peak intervals, and that determines your transmission costs for the next calendar year. So this is really important. I mean, transmission costs could easily be 15 to 30% of your overall electricity spend every year in Texas. So this is a really important thing to understand. And this is all on the regulated side of your electricity bill from Encore, from CenterPoint. It has nothing to do with the supply side of your electricity agreement. Everything to do with the demand side. And in this case, this client in July at least was operating at a reduced capacity on July 13th at 445. That ends up saving, I would say $20,000 to $30,000 a year for next year on their transmission costs. And by the way, this cost component is only going to go up in Texas, because if you think about the transmission system in Texas, population's growing. We just had Uri. We've got cybersecurity concerns. The owners of the transmission system need to invest more and more in the transmission grid, and the way that they do that is through this tariff. So the rates we pay for transmission are only going to increase, at least that's my guess for the near future. So again, being able to reduce our costs on this particular component is going to become more and more important. Any questions on how the 4CP piece works? That's a pretty important concept I want to get out there today. All good?
Just wanted to comment real quick. I heard some of the folks in the room, they have tenants that also pay their electricity. So this may directly affect you guys in the room, but it also affects your tenants. So it's just another set of information you can offer to them as a value add to raise awareness on their end and help lower their budget costs as well.
Thanks, Ben. Demand response. Again, these are programs, including 4CP, that allow us to either save money or generate cash by reducing our electricity usage at times of peak demand or of grid stress. Talked about 4CP. There's some of the kind of parameters around how that works. More and more, we're actually seeing suppliers. So Reliant, for example, we've been marketing a program with them to some of our larger industrial clients the past couple of months. Suppliers can call these programs as well. So they'll say, hey, Mr. Client, tomorrow at 3 p.m., we'd like for you to reduce your electricity consumption. And if you do, we're willing to pay you $20,000 per megawatt per year for doing that. And there are all sorts, Reliant is able to make money and monetize this type of demand response because they're selling their forward hedges into the market that's paying them more money. But of course, sorry, the screen's tweaking out a little bit. But of course, clients can benefit as well from doing that. So we're seeing a lot of innovation, a lot of activity in this particular space, demand response. There are also mandatory programs. So I should say 4CP and supplier dispatch are voluntary. So you don't curtail, you don't reduce energy when you're asked to, no problem. There are also mandatory demand response programs that pay you more, but you're required to participate, or they don't penalize you, but they kick you out of the program. The utility companies like Encore and CenterPoint offer these, as does ERCOT, and that one is called ERS, Emergency Response Service. So if anybody in the room feels like they've got some flexibility to their electricity loads, please let us know. We'd love to deep dive with you on this topic a little bit more. And again, they can be very lucrative, talking kind of $50,000 to $100,000 per year for kind of your typical 1 megawatt type of facility. All right, last but not least is going to be sustainability. I've got here, y'all can tell I like these kind of spectrum charts, arrows. I've got here the different shades of green. So the different options available to folks in Texas to quote unquote go green. Obviously our darkest shade of green is going to be installing solar panels or wind turbine at our facility. This isn't all that popular in Texas. The current payback period for a solar system in Texas is, I'd say, between 5 and 10 years. We don't have any state subsidies for this, which is probably a good thing at the end of the day. We've got a lot of solar that's being built at the utility scale, like way out in West Texas. It's really, really big solar farms and wind farms. But in terms of on-site renewables, we're not seeing a lot of activity there, which is very different from states like California, New Jersey, New York. We've got a lot of East Coast solar projects going right now. Again, not a very big deal here, but there are a lot of other ways that you can quote unquote go green. The two on the right, I would say, are the most popular in Texas right now. There's the concept of a retail renewable contract. So this is where not only are you buying your electricity from like a Reliant or a TXU, but you're also buying an equal number of renewable energy credits every year, again, from that same supplier to get you to 100% green. And then you can also just go and buy voluntary RECs. So something that we've seen a lot is for folks that have facilities in Texas and some other state like Nevada, Minnesota, and they don't have that option to go to an electric supplier and go green. What you can do is buy voluntary RECs for a facility in Minnesota or in Nevada and sleeve it through your electricity supplier in Texas. That's becoming a really big deal because, again, it's really hard you can't pull off those purchases in a lot of other states in the country. You can do it here. So it's just a matter of quantifying what the requirements are for these facilities in other states or other countries, actually, and then executing that transaction through your electricity supplier here in Texas. We're seeing a big pickup in that type of activity. And then last but not least is on the gas side. What can we do from a corporate sustainability standpoint on the gas side? This is a topic we get questions on this. I'm not kidding, all the time in New York. How can I have renewable natural gas at my skyscraper in Manhattan? And it's technically very difficult to do that. You can do it, but it requires having a tank that'll hold the gas, and then a truck delivering renewable natural gas from these primarily come from landfills, and where they capture the natural gas, quote unquote renewable, deliver it to your facility. So that's the dark blue option. It's a little bit harebrained, but that's going on out there. At least the discussions are going on. But a really big one is the dark blue version of this, which is called carbon offset credits. It's a booming market right now. We're working on several deals, and the prices are through the roof. Ben and I were talking a minute ago. Inflation, right, is all out in the economy. It's in the carbon offset market as well. So it's expensive, but it's valid because the idea here is that for every ton of CO2 that I emit from my facility, I can sequester an equal ton of CO2 back into the ground. And the way the market-based mechanism to make that trade or to make that transaction work are these carbon credits. So if you guys are if there's you're owned by somebody who has a very strong carbon neutrality statement, that's the way to approach that problem as of right now. But that's a very, very dynamic market. Lots of changes coming probably, and certainly high prices. I think that is it for my section of presentation. Any questions before I pass it on? Great, thank you. That's right.
Wow, lots of great information. Can everybody hear me? Okay, perfect. Before I jump into my information, I'm going to quickly tell you about Southern Botanical, the offices we're sitting in right now. And this is our Dallas office. We have another branch that we just opened in Carrollton, and we have a satellite office in Salina as well. We've been in business over 25 years. We are locally owned, one owner, same man that Started this in 1995, still here. His office is actually right there. Jason Craven. We have everything in house. It's one-stop shop. So you have an arborist, one of our newly certified arborists sitting right there, Taylor. You have an agronomist. An agronomist does all the health of the turf and the shrubs and all that for the insects and disease control. You have construction, so we can start from ground up. We also have residential, which is actually where we started, but we also have our commercial business as well. To jump into all that great information that Reicher gave us on energy, I'm going to kind of get specific with landscape and how you can save energy through that. Specifically through irrigation and how you can conserve not just energy, but water. Some important things to look at with your current irrigation system is the equipment. That's so important. How often is it inspected? How new is your equipment? What's the life left on the equipment? Is it completely working? Are they noticing that when it's getting inspected? One thing that at Southern Botanical we utilize on every property we go into, whether they have it or not, and switch them out, are these weathermatic smart links. What that does is it works Wi-Fi to an app on a phone so that you can control your irrigation system from the app, whether it's to shut it off, whether it's to monitor it. It's all doable from the app alone, kind of see what needs might be changing out there. Or if we get on site and we want to turn something on, we don't have to run to the irrigation box, run back to the color bed that we're in, we can just turn it on from our phone. Another thing to think about with your irrigation and how it can save is who's inspecting your irrigation system. Make sure they're licensed. That's very important. It's a requirement in the state of Texas, which you'll be surprised. Is your current vendor using a subcontractor for the irrigation, or is it somebody that you're working with, that they work with? This is important for communication, so that if you have a question about that inspection you're handed, who's giving you the answer? Is it somebody that's just kind of guessing what they were meaning, or is it somebody that can actually talk directly to whoever inspected the system itself? When you have an emergency, when it's 10 p.m. and a mainline breaks, who can you call? Do they have the availability to call right away? I know with us, we have a line that texts all of our management and our irrigation team in Spanish and English. At least, and again, we can use the app to get everything turned off if needed, or come on site until more repairs can be done. Another thing, when I was talking about the inspector, is this somebody that you can partner with, or is it just somebody that's coming out and doing inspection and handing you a report? Or is it somebody that you can partner with long term to look at forecasting for budget purposes, how much irrigation repairs you might be needing, the life of your controller, like I mentioned earlier. Is there a need for that in the future? To work together with you to be a full-time partner. And those are some of the ways that you can yourself reduce energy through the water conservation. I'll back up just a little bit. That weathermatic system is notorious for also because you can control it a lot better. Notorious for saving anywhere from 20-40% from the water. So it's a fantastic system. That's why we utilize it. It's very important. Some quick information, and now I'll turn over to Mark. He can tell you a little bit more about how to conserve energy communication.
Thank you, Kim. So we had energy discussed in electricity and water. There's other forms of energy that are effective projects, and one of them is labor force. So in other words, who's maintaining your project? How long is it taking them to do it? And is it being done properly? And one of the main elements that can affect that is plant choice and actual design. So where's the plant being planted? Is it in the proper environment for it to do well? Is it in a location that's, we're always having to deal with that plant because it's growing very fast. Here I have in the far right, Lily Agnes, one of my favorites. If you don't know Lily Agnes, if I trimmed it today, it would be 2 feet tall in 3 days. It's exaggeration, but really not. It really goes very fast. Used a lot on lot of industrial sites because it does take over an area, nice edge. It spills up fast, but that's the problem. It's very fast, so it has to be trimmed. Hollies usually will be trimmed about 8 times a year. Iliagnus is about 16. So now you're spending more labor, more energy on your projects than maybe you didn't need to if a different plant material was chosen. So it's really important to look at what plant material is on your site. Always like the fact that you may have a bank of windows right here, and there's a plant here that has been planted. Its normal mature side height is about here. So now we've got, for the rest of our lives, we've got to trim it to here and keep that there for forever. What if we had picked a plant that at its mature height is here? Now we have very little energy that we have to spend on that. The price to maintain the project is lower. It's that thought process that your vendors and your partners in your landscaping need to be considering when, if it wasn't designed that way initially, if it comes around to the time to start, hey, I've got a new tenant in here, we're going to freshen up this area. What do we do to improve that and improve your contracts going forward so that we're not out here every 2 weeks cutting the iliagnus, or we have a plant here that's got all thorns on it and it's right next to the front door. Yeah, we have a tree that's blocking my security camera, and the security guys are saying, hey, I cannot see over there. Now I have a liability. So it's important to consider all this. And I have Asian jasmine here as well. I have it on a nice slope. That looks pretty. It's a bear to maintain, especially if it's an excessive slope. Now I've got to have people up there. They could trip, they could fall off. It'd be nicer if we put a plant material up there that maybe needs trimming twice a year rather than 8. So it's important to look at this type of materials and see, just do we want somebody trimming on a ladder or up on a pole trimmer every 8 times a year? You know, it's that type of thing that are affecting your property and affecting the energy used on the site. So also, I wanted to look at this. Another thing that can affect it is actually the materials themselves. So, and where you plant them. It's better to be more diverse in the plant materials you put out rather than put a huge hedge of Indian hawthorn that goes all the way around the property. How does that Indian hawthorn look right now?
Yeah, all of
Is that looking good right now? It does, even in death, it may save the show. That is absolutely true. We lost it all. I don't know if anybody, you know, we were talking about me being around the 40s in landscape, which is true. 1983, we had a freeze. It was actually longer than the freeze we just had. The one in February was 195 hours approximately. The one in 1983 was 200 and something. Back then, we had a great plant called the waxleaf ligustrum. It was a pretty plant, grew a little fast, but it was green all the time, grew fast, gorgeous. There's not very many of them around here anymore because we lost every one. So after the freeze, nobody went back with that. Why would I go back with that? I just lost it all. I don't want to lose it next year. We're dealing with that right now. We're dealing with clients saying, do I really want to put Indian hawthorn back? Do I want to put the sporums back?
No.
Rhetorical. So yes, that's the problem. Is now it took 40 years and didn't remember. So we'll put palm trees out there. We'll put all kinds of trees out there. And the palm trees are coming back. So, but so in mass planting, better being diverse. It would be better if this would have some Indian hawthorn, maybe some other plant material, so that when we got the freeze, we're only replacing the Indian hawthorn. So I'm not replacing a mile of Indian hawthorn. I'm replacing just the stuff that we lost. So I'm not saying not to use the things. I'm just saying, don't go crazy and just have a giant 100-foot by 30-foot mass planting of anything. Because something's gonna take it down at some point. It could be an insect, it could be disease, fungus, virus. Something's gonna take it down, and possibly take it in or at least damage it. So would it be better if we just lost a few of those things? Here's one, knockout roses. Anybody interested in that? We're certainly talking about knockout roses, but that was the end all be all savior for this area. We couldn't grow roses because they got black spot, and knockout roses came out. Do great against black spot. We don't get black spot. We get rose rosette. It came out and took out a lot. So I used to take care of the city of Grapevine. Every one of the medians had miles of knockout roses. Lost almost everything. And they liked it. Hey, I like a big mass. I want a quarter of a mile of landscape. That's all roses. That'd be cool, wouldn't it be? Now they're having to replace it. So let's pocket plant material with other plant material that handles the same environment, water needs, and the like. Now you have a more natural look to it, and I'll understand. We have owners out there. I do not like grasses. I do not like. They want a formal purple holly hedge. Understand? So maybe we break it up and have formal purple holly hedge, and then we have formal something. So we can work with the formal needs of some of the ownership appearance requirements, but it's important that we understand that any of this, if something occurs, to take it all out, and we prefer to take just some of it out and save us the need to have to replace everything. So this is something I think is very interesting to consider. Fixed assets on your property, your industrial property. We all know them, right? Children, they last this many years. I'm gonna have to replace the roof in this many years. Fire systems, they're gonna last this long. Elevator motor, I'm gonna have to replace it at this time. What about your landscape? Shouldn't your landscape be considered the same way? It is an asset for the building. So how many trees do you have? What type of trees? What kind of pros and cons do we have for those trees? Do we have 30 ash trees? And we're gonna have issues with those, so we need to know that. And going forward, we need to budget for, hey, we may need to have an insecticide set up in here. And by the way, if we get to a point where we're replacing that tree, let's go with a different tree. Let's go with a tree that's better suited to this area, better suited for the area that it's sitting in. It may be, they planted it right next to the building. Now we have the security issue. We have, the limbs are always pulling down, so we have a canopy, having to deal with that all the time because people get poked in the eye with cars. So it's important to consider that in that group of fixed assets, that's also your fixed asset. You should be talking and discussing that with your landscape provider and saying, I need an inventory of my landscape. I need to know how many trees I have, what type of trees they are, how many square feet of whatever type of shrub, all the different shrubs, how much color do I have? Seasonal color, do I still want to keep that much seasonal color? Because that's a turnover change that I have to pay for every year. And what perennials, ground cover, the whole nine, it's just like your irrigation. You should know how many zones you have out there, how long in a zone about could last. Same way. You know what? These trees, yeah, they could last 30 years, but these trees do not. The Bradford pear, not one of my favorites. It's quick, pretty white flowers for a second in the spring, and then it just sits there waiting to fall. It's just a very weak branching system on those, and we get these winds that we have that'll take them down, take out a tree, take out a car, or a person. That's not what we want. You need to have your trees evaluated. Are they in good shape? Are they they need to be thinned out. If your trees are not thinned out, they're like a sail. And we get these heavy winds, it's a sail pushing against that. It's gonna push the whole tree over, a large portion of the tree. If we can thin them out, we get wind movement through those trees, it'll help quite a bit to keep those from having damage. And so all the things that you have to do and consider inside the building and around the building, same thing should be happening with your landscaping. Let's put together an inventory for it. Microsoft does that. They say, hey, I need to know how many trees I have on my headquarters. It's a simple process. And then we can go, okay, I have this many trees. 10% of them will need to be replaced within the next 5 years. Wouldn't it be nice to have it in your budget? To say, rather than us come to you and go, hey, Christy, I lost a tree. We lost 2 trees over here. We need to get rid of those. This is how much it's going to cost. Rather than saying, hey, we need a budget for those trees to eventually probably need to replace. You have in your budget, now you don't have to go to your owner and go, I got this problem. I got every Indian hawthorn on my property that's down. That had to be a wonderful conversation to have with them. They didn't understand it, did they? They didn't understand why are we losing that. So yeah, this is something to consider. Just consider your landscaping part of the rest of the assets on the property. I think that'll put you in a much better position for going forward in your budget system and understanding that also is just like your lights. We need to replace the lights, we need to replace the ballard. We need to do something with the lights. So, any questions?
On the weathermatic system, so I looked at that like a long time ago, and it required a whole lot of, like if you're talking about an existing property, it took a whole lot of investment to put all the valves on the, the system and everything. Has that changed?
So if it's a 2-wire system, you have to have the modulars for each of the valves. Those have to be weathermatic modulars.
Okay.
So that can be a little bit expensive. If it's just changing out the valve that's running regular multi-wire, we've actually partnered with weathermatic to the point that when we bid something, it's free to install the landscape control because it helps us.
Right.
We can reduce the labor that we have to put on that. So we have it where we can put a controller on the site for no cost to you. We do have to have the monitoring portion of it, but that's not very much, not nearly what it would be for the controller.
So does the weathermatic still do all it automatically sets itself up as far as the moisture?
Yeah, it comes with a weather station. So you get the controller as well as the weather station. It's going to control off of that. We also, we can walk over here and one of our account managers pull up. You can see we take care of SMU, we take care of the zoo, we take care of all the different places, an industrial, an office, and he can pull up any of those properties and see exactly what the controller is doing, and he can adjust that. So for instance, we shut it off like 3 weeks ago. We turn it on. But is that happening? Is somebody able to go out there and turn those controllers off? Because God knows we didn't need the water. Unless you had an overhang or something, an atrium, something that doesn't get water or rain, really should have been shut off. And just because there's no need for that rain, no water. I laugh every time I come to work. There's a gas station right down the street. Comes on like every day, like clockwork, literally like it's on a clock. It's on at 7 o'clock in the morning. Just, I can go talk to him, but he's just gonna go. Anyway, yeah, so they've come a long way, and the expenses come down quite a bit. Like I said, we're fortunate enough that we've partnered with weathermatic. They work with us hand in hand, and we've got a payment deal that actually, by us putting the controllers on your site at no cost, it actually helps us because now we can, like Kim said, we can be on site and we're not having to run back and forth to the controller and then back over here. We have it on our phone, and we can be standing, I know you have very large industrial buildings like container store, right? Container stores, what, 1,600 feet long. I can be on one side of the controller, can be on the other, I'm still being able to run all the zones to make sure that it's working correctly. Saves us time, saves you money and time off of that as well. So. Anything else, guys?
Good question, Mark.
Yes, right, right?
Yeah, you guys know, like, either your own projects or come across any studies that show the, like, the benefits of trees or any other types of landscaping on, reducing electricity consumption?
Electricity consumption?
Yeah, or is it just so hot here, it doesn't really matter whether you've got trees or not, you're gonna be using the AC?
I see what you're saying. We do, I don't know if we have anything specific to electricity. We talk about the heat island effect for buildings downtown. I know the Trees Inc. is working with downtown to get more trees downtown to reduce that heat island effect. When most of these buildings are installed, they have like a percentage. If you have this in the parking lot, you have to have this landscaping to offset it. Usually it's not enough to offset the heat island effect. But that's a start. And then you kind of evaluate it from there and see where can we improve upon that as far as, you know, anytime we can stay in summer in Texas, we're happy person, at least we're a little happier. Because you know, when they say it's 100 degrees outside, they mean in the shade, right? so besides that, it's very cool. But yeah, it's, as far as electricity, I'm not sure if there's discussions on that. As far as water, for sure, usage on the site. Certainly improved. Anything else, guys? Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Tim, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks again to Bryce and Ben, Mark, and Kim. Shameless plug. I also wear another hat, and I'm on the awards committee. Toby's is coming up. Industrial, I don't think has a building in the last several years that's even been entered into the building. Christy has put together a Google Classroom, and we have a QR code that has a plethora of information on anything that you can imagine and have questions on for Toby. How much does it cost? What do I need to do? It has Chris's contact information because she's an international winner. She is trying to help kind of spearhead this industrial committee, the industrial of Dallas, to try to compete and get to, you know, international and win international. So I don't have a QR code with me. I know you've got it on your phone.
I bet I will.
Chrissy's got it on her phone. If there's anybody who even is like, it's curious, hey, what is it? Maybe it's not this year, maybe it's next year. Maybe you want to be a judge this year and learn more about next year. Just go by her and just scan the QR code. So you have it. See right there. I'm sure I got it too. Susan went through. She is a international winner, correct?
Yeah.
International winner for MOB for last year. So you've got all these assets. Don't be afraid, because you have people that are willing to help, and you have companies like Southern Mechanical, 5, Chamberlain, who can offer you support, monetary support, you know, however we can, and so that's my shameless plug. So if you guys are interested, please at least check out the Google Classroom. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming today. It was an awesome turnout. Hopefully you guys got something out of this, and have a good rest of your week.
Thanks.
Thank you.